righty, you lovely people, we're back. Let's wrap up this module. Again, in this module, we've been asking ourselves, are pleasure and happiness, are they truly the greatest of goods, or is that the only thing that morality should care about? Now, in the previous video that we just finished, we saw how Robert Nozick uses his example of the experience machine to argue that there are things that seem to matter to us besides our subjective experiences and besides, our mental states, things like pleasure or whatever else, stuff that's all up here. Nozick really wants to say there's stuff that seems to be outside of our experience, our subjective life, that also seems to matter to us. And I suggested even perhaps we might conclude that even happiness itself is not simply about our mental states. Perhaps, again, maybe happiness isn't simply what's going on subjectively in our minds. Maybe there's a deeper notion of true happiness that is somehow connected to what's actually going on in the real world. So for instance, let's consider the life of my friend Susan. Suppose that when Susan dies, she believes that her wife and her family loved her. She believes that she is a respected member of the community. And she believes that she has founded a very successful business. And so because of all that, when Susan dies, she dies with a smile on her face. And we might say, wow, she died happy. She died a fulfilled, flourishing life. But I have some bad news for you, folks. In reality, Susan was completely deceived. Susan's wife was cheating on her. Susan's children were only nice to her because they wanted to borrow her fancy car. The members of the community only pretended to respect Susan because they wanted Susan to donate, because Susan had a good business. So they wanted Susan to donate money to their charitable organizations. And that's there wasn't real respect there. And then, and even Susan's business, which Susan thought was so successful, well, it had turned out that Susan's business partner had been embezzling funds for years, and shortly after Susan's death, the business was going to go bankrupt and be closed as a failure because of her partner. But again, Susan didn't know any of that when she died. But then but the reality was so bad. So did she really die happy? Did Susan really die happy with such a delusion? If we were watching a movie, we might be tempted to, if we saw this happening in a film, right, where this person dies with a smile on their face and initially like, wow, this would be a great movie, by the way. We initially think, wow, that person's so happy. But then, we get the flashbacks to what was really going on that Susan was not aware of. And then we might be like, well, was she truly happy now? Because the reality, it seems like maybe she wasn't truly happy. She only thought she was happy. Because keep in mind, if you love mental state theories and you're like, what's the big deal? Happiness is all a state of mind in your head. And of course you're going to say she died happy because she died believing that everything was great. Because Susan's mental states were wonderful. And if you're a mental state theorist, you'd be like, who cares if they were based on lies? She lived a happy life because she thought things were great, even if she was wrong. But some of you might reject this. Some of you might not like these mental state theories of happiness because you might think that something pretty important was missing from Susan's, life. The fact that she was deceived by so much really robs her of true happiness, even though she's not aware of it. Again, this is why this would be, if this was a film, this would be a tragedy, right? The tragedy being that she was so wrong, that she thought things were great. And the tragedy is she never learned the truth before she died. The tragedy, ironically, is that she died with a smile on her face because she's dead and will never know the truth about how she'd been deceived while alive. And so that's, I think, something for you to think about. I'm not going to propose an answer. I think this is a profoundly difficult, interesting question. I wish we had a classroom because I think there'd be lots of cool conversations we could have, unfortunately. Maybe on Twitter, we can see a little bit of that. But again, there's something to think about. Maybe post on Twitter. Tag me. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. Is happiness ultimately just whatever we experience in our mind? That's what the psychologists tend to say. Of course, they're psychologists. It's all in the mind for them. But there's an older notion of happiness. We'll see this older notion of happiness at the end of the course when we read Aristotle. This older notion of happiness that's more than just about what you think is going on. that happiness is about a flourishing life, and a truly flourishing life is connected to reality in some ways. That makes it truly flourishing. Because Aristotle would look at Susan's life and say, that's sad. She didn't flourish because it was all lies. She didn't know. She didn't know the truth. Okay, that's enough. I know. Deep question. Well, it's a philosophy class. Well, we need to have some deep questions. Yeah, tweet about that. Tag me. I'm very curious to know if you guys think happiness is all up here, or if you think there's another kind of happiness that does connect more strongly to what's going on in the real world. Was Susan happy or not? I'd be curious to know what you guys thought. But what we can do right now is we can remove some arm flab. You've completed, or at least nearly completed, another module. So yeah, pat yourself on the back. Remove some arm flab, and then let's go off and finish this module. You know, take that module quiz, do some light tweeting. Again, tag me. I think there's some cool questions here. I would love to see what you guys think. And whenever you're ready, of course, then we can move on to the next module, and this will see a new form of utilitarianism coming from John Stuart Mill. But until then, hey, take care, stay safe.